you for joining us today. My name is Ian Scott, and I am the managing partner at Scott Legal. And today we are going to talk about the EB-5 visa. And before we get started, just one very important kind of update with respect to the EB-5 program. The Regional Center program is coming up for reauthorization again, and so it is going to be very important to get applications filed by September 30th of 2026 to avoid any delays or even issues with the program being reauthorized, because the government has said that if applications are submitted by that date, they will be adjudicated in the normal fashion. So a little bit about the firm. Scott Legal is a full service immigration law firm. We do a lot of investor visas, E2, EB-5 visas, both direct investment, regional center. We're going to talk about those. If you do have any questions during the webinar, you can put them in the Q&A, or you can put them in the chat. We will get to all questions. After the presentation, we will send you out the PowerPoint presentation that we're going to go through. We're also going to send you a copy of an EB-5 guide, and we're also going to send you a recording. So this is going to be recorded as well. So let's jump right into the presentation. At first, let's just talk about the regional center versus direct investment. So the regional center, we'll talk about them in terms of the profile of an individual that is going through this. Someone that's doing a regional center, they really are interested in a passive form of investment. So there might be something like a hotel chain that is that wants to build a hotel chain and wants to raise capital. And they say, okay, I'm going to raise capital and collect money from investors, hundreds of investors, and then utilize the EB-5 program so that those investors can get a green card. So these people are people who are interested in a passive investment. The administrative fees are quite high, usually $35,000 to $50,000, and their investment, just like any other investment. So just because they're, kind of under the government umbrella of the EB-5 program, a regional center program, it still is an investment, and you often want to get an investment advisor to look at what you're investing in. And this particular program supports many different investors all investing in one project. A direct investment, in contrast, is someone who does want a bit more control over their own destiny, so isn't interested in a passive investment. They may be interested in more return. They want to drive the destiny of their company, so they may have started a business on an E2 or something like that, and then they want to obtain the green card by investing the requisite amount of funds in that, and then applying for the green card that way. So they do want they are kind of more the traditional entrepreneurs, I would say, and they are the ones who can you can either have your own business and invest in that, or you can invest in somebody else's business. But the two profiles are usually quite different. And the only program that's up for reauthorization is the regional center program. The direct investor program is already in statute, so that doesn't need reauthorization. So even if something happened to the regional center program, the direct investment program would still exist. So today we're going to go through the kind of two core requirements of investment and job creation, and then also how it is that you actually how it is that you file an EB-5 petition. So the first requirement, the key part of this requirement, just really relates to investment. So that you have invested either $800,000 or $1,050,000 in a new commercial enterprise. So that's an enterprise that was started after 1990. And the difference between these two is if the lower amount is going to be used when the business is located in a targeted employment area. So that's either going to be an area where the unemployment rate is 1.5 times the national average, or in a rural area, and that's going to be designated by the local jurisdiction. And so then everyone else is going to be the $1,050,000. The investment can be made over time. So before you apply, all of the investment should be made, and the investment does have to be investment. So the example that I said, where let's say someone has an E2 business and they've invested money and the business is made, let's say the business makes $1 million in a year, and then that $1 million is spent the next year, the retained earnings is spent. That's not new investment. The money has to come from outside of the business and be invested, and be invested. So the EB-5 is very different from the E2 in the sense they're similar in that they're investor visas, but The E2, does have a source of funds requirement, but the EB-5 program, the source of funds requirement is quite extensive. So whether you're doing regional center or direct investment, you do have to show where the money came from, and that really is very much like an audit. So it is quite an extensive process that you have to go through to show where the money came from. And the investment is going to be an equity investment. So it can't just be kind of a loan. It's going to be either shares or partnership units or membership units or something like that. The second big part of the EB-5 requirement is related to job creation. So you must create, the business must create, so whether it's regional center or direct investment, 10 full-time jobs. And those are, direct jobs that are working for the company. If it's a direct investment. And if it's a regional center, you can actually extrapolate and look at the economic impact of the regional, of the entity and see what that translates to in terms of indirect jobs. So let's say that there's a hotel, and as a result of the hotel, there's a dry cleaner or a restaurant or other businesses that open up nearby. We can look at the indirect employee count of that, and it's going to be an economist that does that. Um, there has to be a link between the investment and job creation. So when you are doing this, you have to be able to show that the amount that you are investing actually does relate to creating jobs. So that's why if you purchase a business, for example, you can't just purchase a business and say, okay, well, the business has 10 jobs and I paid someone 800,000, so I've met the requirements, because the $800,000 has gone to the seller, not to the business, and it has nothing to do with job creation. So you would actually, in that case, have to invest the money in the actual business and then then once the money has been invested, then show the creation of jobs. The both programs, but whether it's regional center or direct investment, do require a detailed business plan. So you do have to show how it is that you plan to create those jobs, and you want to be able to document the full-time positions and the qualified workers for this. For an EB-5 filing, when we actually are filing the petition, we have to file a one I-526 if it's a direct investment, and I-526E if it's indirect, sorry, if it's a regional center program. And the once that's filed, as long as the category is current, which for most people right now it is, you can file. If you're in the United States, you can file an I-485 petition, and if you're outside the United States, you can do consular processing. The process is taking quite a while. If you're in a rural area, sometimes you can get expedited approvals, sometimes within 6 months to a year for the I-526, with another year to 18 months for the I-485. And the I-829 is what's filed after you have the green card for 2 years. You file the I-829, and once the I-829 has been filed, because you first get the green card for a 2 year period, and then when the I-829 is filed, you're showing the government that you have in fact created the 10 full-time jobs, and then you get the green card issued for 10 years. The program, as I said, it's coming up for reauthorization, and the last time it did this, it was in 2022, and that's when the increase of the investment amount occurred. You see here that if you file before September 30th, 2026, then they will adjudicate your petition, so that's very, very important. They changed the rules a bit so that the target employment areas could only be determined by the government, because there was a little bit of abuse that was going on with respect to that. And then they also did these set-asides where they said that 20% of the projects have to be in rural areas, 10% in high unemployment, and 2% for infrastructure projects. And for the most part, that impacts the timing, because what happens is that with these set-asides, it makes the category current if the project falls within either of these areas. A very, very significant change to the program was the allowing of filing the I-485 concurrently with the I-526, as long as the category was current. And that allows people to apply for work and travel authorization. So you get all the benefits, or many of the benefits of the green card, just by doing those filings. The source of funds, they expanded the documentation related to the source of funds to include administrative fees. And they also clarified loans and how loans should be treated in gifts, because they wanted to limit, in particular, the gifts to the immediate family members, but they didn't change that. And then they created some bases to move from one regional center to another in certain circumstances. The program, especially if you are doing the direct investment, you have to keep in mind that the investment, it's not just the intent to invest. So you can't just put money in a business bank account and then apply for EB-5. That's not going to cut it. The loans and gifts, the loan can be an unsecured loan. It can be a secured loan. If it is a secured loan, then you do have to show where you got the money to buy the security. If it's a gift, you have to show where you got the money, gift or a loan, you have to show where that person that gifted you or loaned you the money got the money from. So that's going to be important as well. And as I mentioned before, if you're purchasing a business, you do have to be mindful that you have to do it in a way that actually does create jobs. There's no requirement related to how much of an entity you own. It can be a fractional unit, even a lot of the time with regional centers. They offer partnership units and the ownership percentage is very, very small. And you can't have any form of guaranteed return on investment either. And we talked a little bit about moving from E2 already. Oops. Okay, so the other things to be aware of is the EB-5 program takes a long time. That, in terms of timing considerations, it really does take a long time. It does take normally 4 to 5 years before someone is going to get the green card. Sometimes it could be longer. If you're investing in a rural area, it could be a little faster. You do have to keep in mind that if you're on a non-immigrant visa in the United States, you have to be mindful that you are able to travel or keep your work authorization or have some underlying basis to stay in the United States. And is going to depend on what type of visa you have. If you have something like an H-1B or an L-1, that's going to be a lot better because they're dual intent visas. Whereas if you have something like a TN or E2, it could be more planning. And I think that's really is the key is planning. And we do have people that do parallel green card strategies. They sometimes do EB-5, NIW. They sometimes do EB-5 and then they marry a US citizen and change and get the green card that way. So, but definitely we do see that. And those are really all of the prepared remarks that I had today. So we can open it up for any questions that people have, and we could answer those. Perfect. Well, I don't see any questions from the group, so I think we'll end it here. So again, the September 30th date is an important date. You'll get this presentation, the recording, the EB-5 guide, all sent to you after the webinar, and definitely reach out to set up a consultation if you have any detailed questions about your particular situation. Thank you.